started reselling exactly 1 year ago with absolutely zero experience and zero expectations. And now that I've had a full year of experience in the reselling world, I've learned how to comfortably make $1,000 extra a month and have fun while doing it. If you're new here, I've been sharing this journey on this channel almost from the beginning. So every mistake, every win, every change has been documented. So this is a great video to start with because in today's video, I'd like to first take a trip down memory lane, basically tell the story of the entire last year of my reselling journey. And then secondly, I will reveal the 3 recent discoveries that I've made that have completely transformed my reselling business. And third, I will also be sharing my new and improved 3-pronged business plan that I've recently begun implementing now that I work nearly full-time. So let's set the stage here. 1 year ago in October 2024, my kid had just started preschool. And prior to that, I was a stay-at-home mom for 4 years. Due to spending literally 2 or more hours in the car per day driving her there and back, I only had about 10 to 12 hours a week to work. And that was only on weeks where she had a full week of school, which was surprisingly rare for some reason. So getting a real job wasn't an option unless I worked weekends, which also is not an option for my family. Now, it wasn't my idea to start reselling. It was actually my husband's. And because he's the breadwinner at a traditional 9-to-5, it wasn't necessarily a requirement for me to bring in additional income, but I needed something to do, and why not let it be something that makes money and allows me to work from home and be flexible when needed. So after careful consideration, I decided to go for it. And after doing some research and seeing that eBay was definitely the way to go here, the first thing I noticed about having an eBay store is that people aren't gonna buy from you if you have no positive feedbacks. So this was basically my first task to tackle as a new reseller. Thankfully, eBay helps you with this and actually gives you your first 10 positive feedbacks as long as your item made it to the customer. How was I gonna get people to buy from me? I didn't wanna spend a whole bunch of money right away. So I started by listing my own books, about 80 of them to be exact. I didn't spend much time on it. I just snapped the pictures of the books on my white desk with a white background. I did a short description and then I set the price to about 50 cents lower than the lowest competitor. I wanted to be at the top of the page when somebody filtered for lowest price. Not knowing how long it took to sell things on eBay, about after a week of no sales, I started to look into why my books weren't selling. And I came to the conclusion that basically everyone that sells books on eBay sells it with free shipping. This was when I realized I might need to invest some of my own money to get established on eBay. So I listed them for free shipping and they immediately started selling, except every time I sold one, it actually cost me somewhere between 50 cents and $2 each time. This may seem silly to someone, and as somebody who's now been reselling for a year, it still kind of seems a little bit silly. Why not use that money to actually buy things that actually sell? Well, at the time, I really didn't understand supply and demand. Don't forget, I had zero experience in reselling. I didn't understand any of it. And I was focused less on what sells and more on how to get what I already have to sell and how to build buyer trust. I started listing my own old video games, which I knew would sell for more than books, especially now that I had a little bit of credibility on the platform. They all sold relatively quickly and the money started rolling in. That was until I ran out of my own things to sell. At that point, it was time to go out and do my first sourcing trip. This was sometime at the end of November 2024. It wouldn't be a beginner's journey if I didn't start off with possibly the biggest mistake I made as a beginner reseller, which I actually notice now as someone that's been doing this for a year is a mistake that a lot of beginner resellers make, and that is buying anything and everything and just assuming that it'll sell and being happy as long as it just makes you some profit. That's right. I did absolutely zero research on how to source items that sell. I didn't even watch a single YouTube video. Justin Resales didn't appear in my algorithm until it was way too late, you guys. So I started off by taking what I had already earned plus a little bit of my own money, which ended up being around like $400 total, and just buying a bunch of brand new shoes and other random items on this website called Vista Auction, which is a local liquidator that does most of their business online in the form of auctions. And I say local lightly because not only did I immediately spend $400 thinking that these items would sell, because of course they would, they're brand new. Why wouldn't people buy this stuff? Spoiler, I still have some of it a full year later. But I also spent over $100 in mileage driving to and from this location. So now we're like $500 in the red, and I don't know, 50 plus items are taking up space on my shelves in my garage that I didn't know at the time probably wouldn't turn over quickly. To make matters worse, this was long before I had the super streamlined listing process that I have today. So not only did these items cost me money, but they also cost me a lot of time trying to get the perfect listing photo, trying to figure out how to correctly fill out all of eBay's lovely little drop downs, and not to mention weighing all these items, and trying to figure out the ever complicated eBay shipping settings when I've barely shipped anything before in my life. And even though these items weren't flying off the shelf, I stupidly spent every weekend for a while shopping from this website and digging myself deeper and deeper into the red, thinking, this is just an investment in my business. All of these items will sell eventually. Well, eventually, these items ended up taking up an entire shelving unit in my garage. And at this point, in around December 2024, I started a simple inventory system. And I ended up eventually actually having to build more storage to move things around in my garage so that I could have another free shelf to put inventory on. And this was all because I ended up in what I like to call the death cycle, which is what happens when your sales slow down because you're not listing any items, because you can't source, because you have no inventory space. I actually made an entire video on this cycle, and for some reason it blew up at almost 20,000 views, so go and check it out. Over here, over here, over here, whichever. Anyways, now that I had more space to source, and I finally realized that those Vista auction items weren't selling, I finally started sourcing pre-loved clothing and hard goods at thrift stores. And this was at the beginning of 2025. Again, though, I still hadn't done much research on sourcing at all, so I still wasn't picking up the right things at first. Bare minimum, I knew how to look up an item on eBay or Google Lens, but in my head, if an item had sold at all on eBay in the last 90 days, that meant that it was a good pickup. So this landed me in yet another death cycle, another shelf full of inventory and no more space to put any other inventory, and things weren't moving quickly enough for me to go on large sourcing trips to refill that inventory. So it was time to crack down and really figure out what was going wrong. I couldn't expand my inventory anymore, but I could find a way to source items that actually sell. So this was when I really started researching and discovering sell-through rate. At this point in my journey, by the way, I wasn't selling nothing. I was averaging a few $100s a month in sales, but I wanted to grow beyond that. Once I started figuring out sell-through rates, I had a huge surge in sales, and this happened sometime around March when I finally made it into the black, meaning all of that money that I spent in the beginning to invest into the business came back, and I was starting to actually make profit. And then I had an even bigger surge in sales in May after I went to several garage sales. I bought a ton of hard goods and clothing that resold very, very quickly. I just had like the best sales month ever. And I finally hit that $1,000 goal of mine, $1,000 of net income in a month. I was so excited, and then I just anticipated that this was how it was going to be from now on, now that I have finally figured out supply and demand. Well, you can probably see where this is going. That surprisingly got worse, not better, when the school season was over. I thought that I would have more time, no longer having to drive my kid to school and back every day, twice a day. But it turns out working at home with a 5-year-old is not easy. So over the course of the whole summer, I watched my sales decrease month by month. Garage sales had fizzled out. I was spending a lot of time with family, which is a lot more important to me than the business anyways. And there was even a period of time where I stopped listing for like 2 whole weeks because I did not have time to source and had no inventory, no death pile, no nothing. And not only that, but because I became primarily a clothing seller, I was unfortunately a victim of summer slowdown, which happens to all clothing sellers pretty much over the summer because unfortunately people just don't buy as much clothes in the summer. It's just a fact. I knew though that my entire reselling journey would change yet again when my kid went back to school in the fall because she'd be going to a different school, one that is much closer. I didn't have to drive her to school at all. She'd be there longer. So now fast forward through the summer of awful sales to when school started a few months ago. And now I have a bare minimum of 6 hours a day to work on this. Sometimes more if I'm really focused. So I officially became a full-time reseller. And I say that in quotes because I feel like full-time usually means 8 hours a day. And I also still have YouTube that takes up some of my time. But YouTube is still a side hustle for me. It still brings in a very minuscule amount of income, but it still brings in income nonetheless. And not only did I finally become full-time, but this was also around the same time when I made 3 huge discoveries that completely changed the way I run my reselling business. Here they are in the exact order that they happened. The first discovery was Vendu, who actually reached out to me to try their cross-listing platform, which was something that I actually wasn't super sure about until I tried it, and now I'm never going back. Because even though eBay is still the #1 platform for my sales, not only do I sell things on Poshmark and Depop now, but I make enough on both of those platforms combined to pay for the cross-listing service, and then some. The second discovery is Reseller's Edge University, which came to me at such a good time because they are a clothing reseller mentorship program, and that is primarily what I am selling right now and what I need the most help on. REU has helped me completely change the way that I source and list my clothing. And the third discovery is Whatnot, which actually has been my primary focus for the last month or so. Not only because I love live selling, but also because it makes me double the income that eBay, Poshmark, and Depop do combined. No, seriously, just this month, which isn't even over yet, I've already made over $1,000 on Whatnot alone and around $500 on my marketplaces. And I'll get into more detail on that in just a minute. But first, I need to say a few things before I reveal my running total, which I always do in all of my update videos, or I always have done. Firstly, as a reminder, I was essentially doing this as an extremely part-time side hustle for most of the last year. This was never intended to be a real job where I actually brought in enough income to pay myself handsomely, which brings me to my second point, and that is I have not paid myself a single cent of my reselling income since I started this. Which brings me to point number 3. Almost all of the money that I've made in the last year has gone back into the business in some way, shape, or form, mostly in the form of new inventory, obviously, but also everything that I have needed to finally, after a year, turn this into not just a side hustle, but a fully functioning business. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you would know that that includes things like packing materials, a thermal printer, proper lighting, a new table for my office, random stuff like lint rollers and fabric shavers, items to ensure that I can run a Whatnot show properly, a shipping scale, not to mention travel expenses, etc. The list goes on and on. And if you're curious to know how much I actually net in the last year, it was around $8,550. But that's not anywhere near the amount I have in my reseller bank account. That running total I'm referring to, if you haven't seen any of my other update videos, is a number that most beginner resellers don't even calculate. If you're a new reseller and you're looking at that net total, like for me, it's $8,550, and not taking into account all of your business expenses, you're making less money than you think. My running total tells me how much, if I were to just stop reselling right now and all of my inventory just vanished, not sold, vanished, it's that amount of money. That's the amount of money I would have in my account, liquid, that I could use to pay myself or whatever. At my last update, that total was around $1,200, which was before I started working full-time. That running total goes up pretty substantially throughout the months. The highest I've ever seen it in the entire last year was $2,000. And right now, my running total actually hasn't changed at all in the last 3 months. Well, it has changed. It's gone way up and it's come way back down and it's come way back up again. This may sound shocking to some of you. Why wouldn't my running total be much higher after 3 months of selling almost full time. If you've been watching for a while, you know that I only have a 300 item store on eBay, and I've never had the space to expand beyond that. Despite that, I now have close to 1,000 items of inventory, but 700 or so of them are sitting in a small case that takes up about 2 cubic feet in my office. And they're all in the form of rings, just like this. Ain't it pretty? Now, here's the fun part of this entire update, because this explains where I'm at now and what my plans are moving forward. If you're wondering how I got started in selling jewelry, it's kind of funny. When I discovered Whatnot and found out that I just love live selling, like it just really speaks to me, I wanted to figure out how I could make it a significant chunk of my income as a reseller. And if you haven't tried live selling before, it's typically brutal when you first start off. Loads of $0 days. And let me tell you, when you spend an entire hour or more trying to sell something on a live platform and you sell nothing, it is a combination of embarrassment and feeling like a failure, and it's just not a good feeling. But when you have a great show, it of course feels amazing. And if you did really good, now you just made a decent chunk of money in just an hour or so of being live. I had one day where I made over $100 in just 1 hour of being live, and I was thrilled. It feels great, especially when your marketplace sales are slow. So after a few really crappy shows and a few really good shows, specifically of selling clothing, I sat down with a notebook one day and I just started brainstorming ideas for how I could make more money doing this. I had loads of ideas written down. Some of them were really mild, like I'll just run giveaways constantly to gain a following, and then hopefully because I have more followers, more people will be notified of my shows and I will have more chances to make more sales. And then I had some really wild ideas, like what if I just completely change what I'm selling on Whatnot altogether? The women's clothing category is one of the most saturated categories on Whatnot. It's a literal race to the bottom where people are selling things for $1 a piece and losing money willingly. And it's not that it's not possible to stand out on the platform. There's room at the top for anybody. I just didn't want to do the work to be one of the top women's clothing sellers. So I made a list of other things that I could sell, and obviously one of those was jewelry. And rings in particular, just to keep it more niche and less complicated. And for each of my ideas, I made a pros and cons list, and jewelry was the one with the least cons. So the only cons that I had for jewelry was, number one, I would have to learn about the jewelry space on Whatnot, which I had never even shopped on before. And number two, I would have to learn more about jewelry in general. I already knew the basics. I just needed to know more so that when someone asked me a question, I would be able to answer it. And I do have to say, I learn every single day. When I'm on Whatnot and I'm selling rings, I learn something new every day from my buyers. Shockingly, this was not the idea I chose to run with first. I will very briefly explain that the idea I chose to run with first was a huge mistake. Instead of selling something different, I decided to source new with tags, Target brand clothing to bring into my Whatnot shows. I was able to source these for about $2 a piece. But because I bought these on Whatnot, I kind of got very, very carried away. And when I first started selling these items, it was actually going really well. Like people were buying them for like full price. And so I bought more and more and more and more. And I got very carried away until that stuff was taking up almost an entire shelf in my garage. And then suddenly the sales on that just almost stopped, like just slowed down so much that they almost stopped. I am still gonna make profit off of these clothes at some point, but again, it's kind of like a death cycle thing where it's taking up a lot of space in my garage that I wish it wasn't. But the reason I mention that is to explain that that is part of the reason why my running total is not higher, is because I also invested in that. Anyways, once I discovered that that wasn't the direction to go, I moved on to the jewelry idea. And do you ever just do a thing and the universe or God or whatever it is that you believe in just gives you all of the signs that you are doing the right thing and you're in the right place and you're headed the right direction? Well, that was this for me. I not only was able to quickly establish some regular suppliers for what I was looking for, but every ring show I've had, except for I think one, has been profitable. And my profit margins have been much higher on average than when selling clothing, especially if you compare it to the amount of time I'm on the app. So if that doesn't tell you do what works for you, then I don't know what does. Now, all of this is to say, I am not done selling clothing. No. Not at all. But because Whatnot has been significantly more profitable for me, I definitely have to spend at least half of my time focusing on it. So from here on out, my rough business plan is to split the business up into 3 parts or 3 prongs. So the first prong of my business is the one I started with, the marketplaces, specifically referring to eBay, Poshmark, and Depop, and specifically referring to clothing. My primary sourcing location for this will be the bins and occasionally thrift stores and garage sales, of course. But I have to admit, thrift stores have really raised their prices to the point where I almost feel like it's not worth going there. Even if you found something that sold for like $100 and it took you 4 hours to find it, I just don't find that worth it. So I don't spend a lot of time at thrift stores anymore. I do spend a lot of time at the bins though. The best thing about this prong of the business is I've actually just recently acquired more storage space so that I can source more high turnover goods so that I can make more money. And if you're wondering how, it is because my parents actually built this loft inside their very tall garage. I think their garage was like 18 feet height and ceiling. So they basically split it in half and built a little loft. And the reason why this loft idea was a thing was because my dad has a workspace at the bottom and he needed some lighting and a ceiling so that he could have lighting in his workspace. And the great thing about this plan is that they weren't going to build it at all unless that storage space went to use. So I gave them a use for it. So this is basically my equivalent to all of you Midwestern resellers who have basements, because I do not have a basement. We don't have basements here in North Carolina. It just is not a thing. There's other really awesome benefits to it too. Like my mom is my thrifting and reselling buddy. So if she's home and I sell something, she will pull it for me if she's available to do so. And then when they're not home, because they do travel a lot and they do live in Florida half the year, I will have to go to their house regularly, which is great because I'll be able to keep an eye on their house and flush their toilets and do all that kind of fun stuff. So it was like a win-win-win-win situation, and I'm actually really excited about it. I've been doing a lot of sourcing to fill that space. Okay, the second prong of my reselling business is curated, thrifted women's clothing, specifically for Whatnot shows that I will probably do maybe once a week. I'm still figuring out like the schedule for it. Right now I have it scheduled like every other week just because I've been busy with a lot of life things because it's fall and that's just the way fall is. These items will be sourced only at the bins because I can't sell like thrifted clothing items for much more than like what a thrift store would sell a piece as. And when I'm at the bins, the way I will differentiate between what gets listed in my marketplaces and what gets thrown into a Whatnot show is if it sells for like $20 or more, it'll probably go in my marketplace. If it sells for $20 or less, it'll probably go into one of my shows. But I still will save some really good pieces for my Whatnot shows, especially if it's seasonal and trendy. And my main focus on these clothing shows is going to be seasonal and trendy for sure. And it'll be style based, whether the brand is highly recognized or not. And last, but certainly not least, is the rings, the jewelry on Whatnot. I say jewelry because I do have necklaces and stuff like that, but I prefer to just keep it at rings. I don't have plans to sell jewelry on the marketplaces because even though I do end up with substantial pieces sometimes when I source, I want to save those for my Whatnot community. These will continue to be sourced from the same locations. I have a lot of like options for regular suppliers, and there's a lot of places online where you can get bulk anything, and jewelry is one of those things. My plan is to do 3 or more jewelry shows per week. So far, that is what I've been doing, is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And sometimes I'll do a pop-up in between if I don't have anything to do on Tuesday or Thursday. And I obviously invested more up front on that to make sure that I had like a really good variety of everything. And that has been working really, really well for me. A lot of people will come into my show and I will be able to find something for them because I have such a big variety. And every single show I've had regulars come up and buy from me more than once, and I always have new buyers every time. It's incredible. Now, the funnest thing about this business plan is that this is the first time I've actually had one. This plan has evolved from a full year of reselling, mostly part-time, of making countless mistakes and having lots of success at the same time. And if it feels to you like I'm losing or failing, I just want to kind of flex a little bit here that my store sell-through rate is actually 100%, which means that my turnover is actually really good. I've sold the same amount of items that I currently have in my store over the last year. I've actually sold more items than when I keep in my store. So technically my sell-through rate is more than 100%. So even though I'm not making a lot of money, it doesn't mean that I'm not doing well. It just means that I haven't been doing a lot because I haven't had that much time. That's why this business plan is so important. Now that I'm able to work, 6+ hours a day, what if in a year from now I can be one of those cool YouTubers that's like, I make $1,000 a day reselling? To be honest, that is actually not the goal at all. I don't want to have to work that hard, to be frank. But if you're wondering when it comes to money what my goals are, it's actually to make $1,000 a month on average net. That's what my goal has been for months now, and I've actually completely surpassed that goal. I'm almost at $1,600 just this month alone, and this month isn't even over. You'll be seeing a what sold video from me next. And so now I guess I need to make a new goal, but I think I want to wait till 2026 because I want to make sure that I can consistently make $1,000 or more a month all the way through December. Whew. All right, now that we've discussed everything I promised, I wanted to quickly mention a few things. One is that I started an Instagram account. It is Taylor Joe Flips, just like it is everywhere else on Whatnot, on eBay, on YouTube, and everything. I created it mostly for Whatnot previews, but I think I'm actually gonna make it just like my reseller business Instagram. So please, please, please go follow me on there. I only have like 20 followers on there because I just made the account. So it would mean the world to me if you did follow me on there. And as always, in my link tree, you will find everything Taylor Joe. I always have my link tree in my description. I think a lot of people miss it because I will still get questions in my comments of like, where is your eBay store? And can I see your Poshmark closet? So my link tree has all the affiliate links that you need. There's a discount code for Vendu. There's a discount code for Resellers Edge University. There's a discount code for Whatnot if you want to be a seller, or if you just want to shop on there, it'll give you $15. It'll give you $150 match if you're a seller and you sell stuff in your first week. And I also have Amazon affiliate links for some of the items that I actually use for reselling, like the thermal printer that I use, for example, or the photo light that I use. And there's also links to my eBay store and my Poshmark closet if you want to stock my store and see how I list things or compare mine to yours or whatever you want to do. And my Whatnot link is in there too, so that you can stock me at your heart's desire. Please don't ask me to send you used socks because I've had enough of that on that app. And if you've made it this far in the video, you are probably a loyal subscriber. That is what my analytics are telling me, that my videos for the last couple of months are not getting pushed out past my subscribers, past the people who always watch my videos, which is actually kind of awesome because I'm still getting like just under 1,000 views. And that means that there's that many people that watch all of my videos, which is so freaking cool. And I'm so grateful for it. And if you've made it this far in the video and this is the first video of mine you're seeing, definitely subscribe because you're probably going to be one of those people that likes my videos. And also, if you have come from YouTube and popped into my Whatnot show and told me, hey, I'm coming in from your YouTube, that just makes my day. That has happened so many times over the last month, and it's just really, really cool. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you guys. Again, my next video will probably be a what sold in October, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye. Whoops.